Back-to-back race weekends. First in Circuit of the Americas, now in Mexico, which are completely different tracks because of a lot of reasons, and some upgrades are coming here, but there's a lot of things to discuss kind of with these upgrades and what they really mean. There are some big upgrades coming from one team, which is the team in green, but I want to speak about the big teams in general and what we should be expecting here because it is a very particular track, and some teams tend to struggle here big time, not only with bringing parts, but also when they add the parts, what it does to the cars. So let's first talk about Ferrari. But before I get into that, I wanted to thank you guys on the channel and thank you so much for subscribing or viewing or whatever you may end up doing. Let's set out a goal for 20,000 by the end of the year. That'd be pretty crazy. I don't know if we'll get it, but I'd love to try, and it would mean a lot for me if you subscribed. So please do. Put a lot of effort into these videos and getting them out to you guys, and thank you for just supporting in general. Let's get into Ferrari. So Ferrari has struggled here for a very long period of time, and that is because the actual engine of the car and the turbo that they have in it does not work to the altitude of Mexico. So Mexico has a different altitude to most other tracks. I mean, when you look at Austria, you see that it's in the mountains. You see Spa in the mountains. Even Coda has that crazy high elevation, making it actually the highest place that we race at, which is a huge difference for actual racing. But what does that mean? It means that the cars actually have to place on a lot of downforce in comparison to no downforce. So cars like Ferrari, yet again, will struggle here. They like setups to be more towards the low downforce side, but wind isn't really too much of an issue here in Mexico. It's more of how the actual grip on this track works. But also with that turbo, last year they were a whole second slower, and they were the second most competitive car to Red Bull. And this is because of their engine. They had to tune it down, but the upgrades we can expect here from Ferrari will be all in the cooling. Max cooling, like they had in Qatar, will be back here. And it's not a struggle for the drivers because it's a pretty easy track to drive. It's mainly because the car will struggle on the engine side, but also sticking down. That mechanical grip is really hard to get here because of the elevation change, and max downforce is very important. So Ferrari might be a team to look out for here, not expecting a great result from them. Next team I want to go into is Red Bull. Obviously Red Bull is not going to be bringing any upgrades. They might be bringing back those big cooling louvers that we saw in Qatar. Now, they have them on their side pod and they have them on their engine cover. This car is going to be supreme here. There's only a couple teams that I think can actually challenge them here, but they will be very strong. Next team I want to talk about is McLaren. McLaren says that their upgrade packages are done for the year. We're not going to be seeing any more. We'll see the exact same package that we saw in Qatar come here with a big wing. Let's see if we see the actual cutout in the wing still come back for their team. But they did bring that in a high downforce track, so I still expect it for this McLaren team. They could be very strong here. They're actually a team that kind of fights with drag, and drag isn't very important here because you want the car to be actually a little draggy here and pretty downforce struck. Their mechanical grip is good because of their suspension, so they should be a pretty strong team here. I actually think them and the next team I'm going to talk about will be a big threat to Red Bull. It's a track where I think a lot can happen. And if you remember, back in the time before we were in these ground effect era cars, the cars that were, I guess, the turbo hybrid era, but without the actual floor, those cars, Red Bull was always great here. And why was that? Well, Red Bull was a car that had a lot of downforce. That 2021, 20 spec, 2019 spec, all those cars were kitted out on downforce, but the engine was a bit weaker. Here, most engines will be tuned down anyway, so the actual Red Bull advantage won't be as significant here because we know that that Red Bull car is super strong on not only its engine, but just the car in general everywhere, including its engine side, is very powerful. McLaren and both now Mercedes might be bringing a few parts. That's kind of the rumor right now. I wouldn't expect much other than actual cooling parts, which some parts of it were on the side pod, and we already know within those big shoulders, they do have some cooling louvers at the very top to bring out the air from the other side of the back of the car to give some rear downforce, but also to cool off the engine. Mercedes should be very strong here. Their tire wear has been good. It's a track where tires are super important, but also, as I said, super big grip. And this new floor upgrade, without obviously the disqualification that happened for Lewis, this team is looking very deadly here. This is where I expect Lewis and really the Mercedes team to go maxed out. They should be pretty strong here. I expect a big result for them. Now the team that is actually bringing the biggest expected upgrades is Aston Martin. Now this is confirmed from Ted Kravitz. Mike Crack even talked upon it, that they are bringing more parts to add upon that COTA package. So what did they do in COTA? They actually ran Lance on the new upgrades and they ran Alonso on the Qatar spec. Why did they do this? Well, if you saw the qualifying, if you saw the sprint, you would have to close your eyes being an Aston Martin fan because that was abysmal to watch. Both the cars could not perform. The car was in such a bad setup window. They were like, all right, break park ferme, let's go for 2 different cars, but set it up to the optimal setup. Now, obviously they had no data on the new setup, so maybe there's even more to extract with the car, but this was a guess that they took, and Lance was fast. He was actually running with the front runners at some point in the race on the medium tires. They were very quick. He was in traffic the whole entire time, and even with that, his pace was very quick. Also, Alonso on the before spec was only like 0.74 faster than him. And if you've kept up with the season, Alonso's always been a solid 3 to 4 tenths above Lance. So put that into retrospect, and they're a pretty damn quick car. So with all that combined, what can we expect to be added on? Well, they did add parts to the diffuser. Some parts to the rear deflector was actually added a little bit before this as well. They added parts to the floor and changed its philosophy. They actually say that this concept change is pretty significant for 2024, and they will continue upon working on that. This could mean changes into the side pods. They obviously changed that undercut in the car, more smooth, not really relaying that floor to catch that downforce into the beginning, but having more smooth exit towards the back. I think this is the whole entire thing of them trying to change the car to have less drag, but also more aero efficiency. They say they want the car to be a lot more well balanced. It did seem like the tires were actually doing pretty well and they were consistent on Lance's car. Alonso actually had a moment where he said that his tires were getting shred up. And we know this guy's a master of tires, so I'd love to see Alonso in that car. You know that Alonso himself is an upgrade for the upgrades of a whole 3 tenths. I saw a funny picture showing what the actual Aston Martin car is turning into with the upgrades. Wanted to show it, and Lando Norris even says that they're bringing downgrades, not upgrades. And they really got to prove themselves here in Mexico. This is a big GP for Aston Martin. If they fail here, then they should just throw away the season and hope that 2024 they can nail it, because this is big for them to make sure these upgrades are actually correct. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, and remember, please subscribe and like. It would mean the world. Thank you guys so much. Peace.